Welcome to Education in Our Community. Today I have the honor to interview the interviewer. This is a phenomenal woman, a woman who is a writer, an author, an executive producer. She's a motivator, teaches life skills. She is a community member. She's part of the Education in Our Community family with her own series called Stop the Madness. And we are pleased to know and welcome Doris Mangrum to our show. Welcome, Doris.
Thank you so much, Laura. I'm excited to be here. Feeling a little odd on this side of the set, but happy to be here.
Thank you. One thing I always say about you is that you don't just show up at church and be another person sitting at church with God being there with you. Wherever you are, you bring God with you.
Oh, wow.
And we appreciate that.
Thank you so much.
Tell us, who are you, Doris Mangrum? Where are you from, and how did you end up gracing us with your presence in the Bay Area?
Very good question. I was born in Savannah, Georgia, and my formative years were spent in a little town called Itta, Mississippi. Itta means little house in the woods, and that's basically what it was. My mom and dad were both college professors at Mississippi Valley State University, and so I grew up there and then went back to Savannah and went to college there. Taught school 1 year in Georgia, then made my way to California. Did corporate America for about 10 years and then began to have my own family and moved out of that world and then went into what has become my life work and working with others and helping people to expand their lives and move forward.
Whoa. Well, we're excited to hear about your life work, but before we go there, I would love everyone to hear about your books. Okay. You've written several books, and please tell us the name of your books and what they're about.
Okay. Well, the first book was called, or is called, After the Bungee Jump, There's Still a Lot of Jerking Going On. And, you know, first time we were going, what the heck? And so it was written, and the title of it was taken from, it's about a family whose mother has been incarcerated for 8 years. And when I think of a bungee jump is, you know, really that crazy thing that it goes out of control the minute you jump off the landing, right? So I saw the person jumping off the landing as the bungee jumper or the commission of the crime. But then at the end of that bungee jump, there's still that jerking, right, at the end of the cord, right? And so these are the things that happen collaterally to the people who are connected to that person who's committed the crime, because there is collateral damage. And so in this story, it looks at the mother who is behind the walls for 8 years, but it simultaneously is walking on the other side with looking at what's happening to the family, so that when that reader is done, they have an opportunity to see not only some of the things that happen to the incarcerated individual, but what's happening to the family as well, and also see a bit of themselves. You know, some of the things: we don't want to be bothered, I don't want my children to play with, oh my goodness, we can't tell because of these things and the others. So hopefully the goal of the book was to make sure that people have a feel for what's happening, not only to that individual, but to the folks that they are connected to and love as well. So that was book one. Along with that book, I wrote a workbook and facilitator guide that is a parenting, life, and relationship skills that walks along with that book as well. The second book, which I just actually finished last year, is called A Soiled Identity: From Triumph to Tragedy and Back Again. And it is about a Marine who is a decorated Marine who does 15 years of service, wonderful service, comes home to the big parade, the big party, and he has PTSD and has a problem with prescription drugs. And the way he handles it, though, is to sell illicit drugs, because he doesn't want to go to the doctor. He wants to handle it on his own. Well, in the process of doing that, he gets caught up on the other side of the walls. And he spends 6 years behind the walls. And so he then has to make his way back, this time coming, though, as a felon. First time he came as a decorated Marine, second time coming back as a felon with a drug felon on his back. And so now, thus the book is about from triumph coming home victoriously, to tragedy, coming home not so victoriously, and back again because he figures out how to make everything work in his life in spite of it all. So those are my two books. And that book also has a workbook and the facilitator guide that goes along with it that walks you through, or walks that Marine or that formerly incarcerated veteran or anyone and their families through that process of transition. Because I call myself a separation and reunification author because all of my topics deal with that.
I love that. Oh, I can't wait to read them.
Okay.
Can you tell us how you got involved with writing and what inspired you to start writing books?
You know, Laura, I think everybody in their heart of hearts wants to leave a legacy, and I thought that a book would be a great way to do it. But for so many years, I had stood in my own way. I can't do this. I don't know how to do this. How do you begin to write a book? What, you know, this, that, and the other. So I went to this little writing workshop. And so one of the exercises that the facilitator had us do was to write about the person who had motivated our lives. And I, of course, wrote about my mother. But then she went around the room and asked us, you know, if you wrote your book, what would it be about? And I said, you know, what my first book was about. It would be about a family whose, you know, life has been impacted by the incarceration of one of their family members. And everybody in the room went, oh. And I go like, wait, maybe I've got something here. And so then she asked, she said, well, what research do you need? I said, well, I've been doing research for the last couple of decades. I've worked with this population of people whose lives have been impacted for over 2 decades. I don't have research to do. She said, then, well, you just need to just do it. And I heard that. And then the rest is history. I just began to write, and, you know, it's just taken on a life of its own. But the goal, actually, Laura, was only to write the book. That's all I was going to do, write the one book. That was going to leave the legacy. Then all these other things have just come kind of out of, I don't know out of where. But that was the goal, to write the one book.
Are they fictional or non-fictional?
You know, they're fictional, but they have a real feel to them. And I think it's because of the work I have done, so with hands-on, working behind the walls, working with families, working on in the community with families, and seeing the impact that incarceration has had on those lives. So my characters seem very, very real because they are a compilation of real stories, but told in a fictional manner. Nobody's real story, but a compilation of many. I've had many people say to me, you know, were you inside of my family? How did you know my story? But it's because of having had that hands-on for so many years.
Doris, now I'm even more honored. It's my pleasure to be here with you. Tell me what you really love.
That's easy. I really love helping people. And when I say that, I don't mean like saying hi and bringing a smile to their face. Helping them change their lives, helping them to see their just do-its, you know, because particularly people who are downtrodden, those seem to be the people that I am, you know, drawn to, and I think that comes from my childhood as well. My mom and dad had both been poor before, you know, becoming college professors, but they never forgot where they came from. And so they were always helping, giving food, helping kids in college, you know, we even had people stay with us who could not afford to stay on campus, that kind of thing. So it was, you know, ingrained in me, and it was became part of my DNA to help folks. And so helping others at the level of, you know, a real need and seeing them begin to see the possibilities for themselves is where I gained my strength.
Now, I hear that you also have a business, a company. Tell me the name of it and what is that all about, and how did that get started, and what is it you would like to do with your business?
Okay. My company name, is Saidiana Productions, and Saidiana in Swahili means to help each other. Picked that name on purpose, looked hard and long to find the name, because I wanted the name of my company to embody what my work was about. And so helping others is what it's all about. And it's training, it's workshops, I do multimedia experiences, and I'll tell you a little bit about that. But the goal is to call attention to the plight of people whose lives have been impacted by reunification and then the need to come and separation, be it because of incarceration, military deployment, study abroad, or anything that causes families to be separated. But to call attention to the fact that we don't pay attention. So to shift the mindset, work ethic and general lack of interest that people have around people whose lives have been impacted by these types of things. Because even with military deployment, you know, we applaud that man or woman who's coming back from service, but then that's pretty much it after the parade and after that. And we don't realize the impact that that military deployment or just being in the service alone has had on that individual's life. And we certainly don't understand the impact that incarceration has on the person on the inside, but what's happening to the people who are also doing time on the outside. So my goal now, and that I have not so much hands-on, is become advocacy. And so my company is about going out to tell people about the challenges that exist around incarceration and how the challenges are impacting us in our community, but to not just tell people about it, but to tell people what they can do about it. But to not only just tell them what they can do about it, to show them what they can do about it. Because everyone isn't comfortable working directly with the individual who has been impacted by incarceration, but they may be comfortable with the grandma who's now helping the 4 kids. They may be comfortable with the wife who's trying to find her way now because she has to become the breadwinner and helping do some things around that. So the goal of the company is to, through workshops, through training, through multimedia events, to get that word out, to get people involved, to get people to understand, those who have a desire to work with but don't know how. You know, there's this real fear that people who have been impacted by incarceration, even those who are connected, they're somehow big, scary people, because that's unfortunately the way the media portrays. And I say portrays because most of what we see is about people who have done some really fantastic things in terms of ugly things. And so we begin to have that collateral thinking that everyone must be that way. So to shift that myth, to put out a blanket, if you will, of what's really happening, to examine and unpack those myths, and to begin to look at what we can do differently. Because there's a real fear, and the fear is around a need to protect society and that gap between, you know, how do we become real humanity and believe that people should have a second chance. So we've got to bridge that so that people can begin to say, well, you know, I want to be safe, and we do. But I also believe in second chances. So the way we get to that is beginning to publicly unpack some of the myths that exist around it, as well as some of the myths that exist around people coming home from military deployment as well. So I know I've said a lot, but that kind of wraps it up in a nutshell.
Ironically, something that you just said is that on one hand you have the veteran, the soldier that's coming back home, and you also have those that are incarcerated. Well, oftentimes you have that veteran who ends up homeless, who ends up incarcerated, and the impact that is had on not only their lives, but all of their family members' lives. Where would you like to see things go with your business and your goal of helping the veteran as well as the incarcerated and their family members?
Well, my goal is, first of all, that everyone recognizes that all people are people. You know, that's step one. And that recognition is separate and distinct from liking them or approving of their behavior. If we can start at that point, that we understand that everybody is a human being, and is that human beingness that we must respect. Even though I don't like what you did and I don't appreciate what you did, but if I work from that as my premise, it's going to drive everything else I say and do, I believe, is important. So if I can get people just to recognize that these are human beings that we need to support, because all of us are going to be better as a result of it, that would be a great goal that would have been accomplished. If we can begin to recognize that stain, which is about the film that I did, that the stain, you know, that if we keep rubbing it in, we're going to rub the smell in, we're going to rub the shape of it in, and we're going to make it bigger. But if we just cut that stain out and put in some new things and let that is good be good, and know that is good, work with that good instead of making that stain spread to be all that we see, then we're going to change all of humanity. Is going to be better for it.
Phenomenal woman. Tell us about your Stop the Madness.
It's the series. Oh my goodness.
Yes.
Stop the Madness, practical ways to influence the incarceration crisis. I did radio for about 5 years, and so I thought I'm done because it was hard to put together your guests, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But then I realized I don't see anything on television ongoingly about the crisis, of the incarceration crisis. And I know that there are enough topics. I know that there are enough people doing the work who need to be highlighted. I know that there are enough things that we need to draw attention to that are not being addressed. And so with that, this would be a great platform to begin to open up the dialogue, to give folks who do the work some identity, if you will, to our viewers. And so thus Stop the Madness, Practical Ways to Influence the Incarceration Crisis was birthed. And it's been going on now for, going on almost 2 years now. And, you know, there's tons of people that still need to be talked to and things that we need to address. So my passion was to make sure that that would happen. And so that's where it all came from.
Wow. What keeps you motivated?
You know, and this is going to sound really weird, Laura. I think being turned down or being said no is my great motivator. And I say that in reality because in the work that I do, you can imagine how many no's I get. Nobody wants to hear about the incarcerated. Nobody's jumping to go, oh, wow, let me help, which is why it has gotten to the point that it has gotten to. So I am empowered, if you will, when someone rejects me. Oh, I just go, next. Because that then just means I need to do bigger and better things until someone hears me. So I am pushed forward by rejection, and I think it's something that all of us need to find, because at the end of the day, we are the creators of our own experience. And if I allow rejection, someone else's rejection, to block my path, then I have succumbed, if you will, to someone else running my life. And that's not the way I choose to live. I choose to be about Sadiana, helping others, and doing whatever I can. And when someone says no, hey, that means I'm supposed to do something a little bigger than I had thought that I was going to do in the first place. So it's a self-motivation process. I don't need to talk to anybody. I talk to myself, if you will. I say to myself, I know that this is population that needs to be helped. I know there are not enough people doing it. I know there's some amazing work being done, but still not enough. And so I just keep doing what I do. And hopefully I'll come across that right person or right group or right organization that joins me. And along the way, things have happened. And along the way, things have progressed. We're seeing a lot of progress in this area now. And so that's how I motivate myself. That's how I keep myself going.
What has been some of the largest challenges you've experienced?
I think that we just talked about it.
Yeah.
No, people not, well, in addition to people not understanding it, is people who say they want to understand, but then only just talk about it. You know, we've got more forums, summits, think tanks around this arena than I just care to talk about. I just don't even like to be involved in them anymore. By and large, what happens is we get all this money thrown at talking, and then nothing happens out of the talk. And so I think that that is one of the frustrations that I have around it, is that you know, people will say they want to do the work, but then they get in and find out how difficult the work is, because it's not like going to the store with your grocery list and picking up the things you get and then paying for it and going home. Because people's lives, typically who have been impacted by incarceration, have seen so many atrocities or so many things that have gone wrong. When you go in with your little program or your little idea or your little, it's not going to necessarily work the way you thought it was. It's not going to necessarily be received the way you want it to. So it's going to take perseverance to keep pushing at it, and to recognize that a person making this little step forward is a major step forward if a person has had a lot of things that have gone wrong in their life. So you have to be a person in this work. You have to understand that success may come in small doses, and it might not necessarily look the way you thought it will. So this has been also for me a great panoramic experience in the way I look at things, the way I see things, and knowing that, you know, my way is not the only way. What I learned in school is not the only way of looking at things. And once you learn to accept people where they are, then you can begin to help them reach their highest potential. And everybody who jumps into this work doesn't necessarily know that. They're thinking that it's going to work just like it is on paper. They've written down this little program, and then when it doesn't work, like, oh, these people don't want to be helped. No, they need more help than you thought, and so now you want to move out of the arena. So that has been a great challenge, finding people who are real and get in it to stay in it, and not just running for the money, the reentry money that's out there. And then when that changes, then I'm running to the next thing where the money is, as opposed to finding a problem and really working to try to solve it.
Now, I know that you're involved in other organizations. You're on the board of directors for organizations. That's a challenge within itself. You're a mom. you're a community member, you're writing, you're doing so many wonderful things. What's next for Doris?
Wow. I do not know. And I say that because right now there are so many things you can imagine, because I have my hands in a lot of things. You have to be very careful when there are so many things that open up to you, that you're very quiet in terms of listening and not just jumping because it sounds good. I've done that before, and you get yourself in a lot of trouble anyway by jumping. Oh, that sounds good. And so I'm very careful to protect the integrity that I feel that I have gained in my life in terms of my work and what I do. And so in terms of what's next, I want to do something that's going to be very impactful. Let me just put it in general terms. I would love to be able to connect to somebody or some people or some organization that's really ready to do the work and has the wherewithal to make that happen. So that we can take this work, this area of the work, in a national level. My heart is around families and children and communities, because family at the end of the day is our community. And they're crumbling. And they're crumbling not because they're bad. They're crumbling because we've left them. And we've left them, and we've left grandma, and we've left all the folks who are trying to keep that thread of community together. And so if we can find enough people to recognize that we can't just look at the problem and try to get rid of the problem, we have to look underneath it and find out what's driving this, where did this come from, then work on the root cause and begin to emerge and rebuild our garden, if you will. Yes.
Wow. There was a time when we were growing up, when you went to church to get that kind of support that you're looking for. You could go to church there was all kind of rec centers in the basement of the churches. That's where we went to get the kind of guidance we needed to stay off the street. Are you finding that the churches are willing to be supportive of your plight?
Yes and no. Okay. Some are, some aren't. And I don't want to make a blanket statement. This is obviously not about all churches, not about all situations. But one of the things that chaps my hide, is a good way to say it, is that our denominations don't want to work together. Sometimes even within the denominations, there's this pull against, who wants to do this and that or the other, or the feel that you're going to come and take over what's happening here, and not a real understanding, and not really seeming to really want to understanding, having the sound bites and saying this is what we want to do, but then not really wanting to let it be done. So yes and no. There are some amazing churches that are doing some amazing work and taking a big share of it, but there's so much work to be done. What I'd love to see is a coalition of our faith-based community, and cross-denominational. And it doesn't have to be the big churches. A lot of times small churches, well, we're so tiny, we only have 30 members. You're the ones who can get things done, because there's not so many of you that you can't figure it out. So I'd like to see my small and medium-sized ministries come together in coalitions and not just talk, just lay it out. I'm happy to help lay it out. I have a myriad of ideas of the way things can happen and how to roll them out in activities that can change and make that integrated individual that we need to see in our youth. Because, while I do incarceration and talk about military deployment, we've got to look on the front end. We've got to stop our babies from going in the first place. And so that happens with community involvement, connection. And so long answer to your question was, ultimately I see myself being a part of changing the world. And I believe that if I keep talking and not letting no's get in my way and keep saying next to those things that don't agree, or people who don't agree, that I'm going to do that.
With all the privatizing of the jails or the prisons, are the government entities involved in trying to make a difference at all, or are they just passing it on to the people who are running the jails and making the money?
You just hit the word. The last word you said is the money.
The money.
And so that is that's a sad kind of response to everything. It's that love of money that keeps us from making the progress that we should, because there's money in putting people behind the walls. And if that is you're driven by how much money you're going to make and how much money you're going to make for your investors in these private prisons, then you're going to keep doing the profiling. You're going to keep doing the stereotyping. You're going to keep putting more brown and black people behind the walls. You're going to keep stopping them more often. You're going to keep arresting them more often. You're going to keep keeping them behind the walls longer than other people because it's serving that purpose. So to answer your question, I believe that the privatization and the industrialization is, we have this book that Michelle Alexander wrote, the Jim Crow, the new mass incarceration, the new Jim Crow. Well, it's not new. It's been around forever. We're just beginning to see it more and recognize it more. But on the flip side of that, that's the negative end of it. On the positive end, all of that negativity has now brought us to a place where we recognize that we must do something other than just sit around and go, oh my goodness, is this happening again? And so we're beginning to see people marching. We're beginning to see our young people take the forefront. So at the end of the day, whether our churches, whether our government takes it over, we individually, see, power and change happens from the bottom up and not from the top down. And once we, the people, recognize that together we can make a difference, things will occur.
Doris, one thing I learned when speaking to one person or whether you're speaking to 2,000 people, you make them feel like they're right in your living room. I appreciate the fact that I've had this opportunity to sit in your living room and have this discussion with you. There is so much to be done, and I look forward to doing more with you. I look forward to going on and on, supporting what's happening in our communities, supporting what's happening with our brothers and sisters who are incarcerated and the family members who are impacted.
Yes.
I appreciate you and all that you've been doing, from your writings to your messages, verbally as well as physically, being out there, hitting that pavement and inspiring the other people like myself to get out there and work on behalf of the incarcerated as well as our veterans. I want you to just know that we appreciate you and appreciate all you do. And I appreciate having the opportunity to sit on this side of the podium and this side of the camera and interview you, because there is so much more to you. And so I'm happy to go forward and say thank you all for listening to this Renaissance woman, Doris Mangrum. Do come again.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so
Take
much,
care.
Lora. It's been fun. Thanks.